Hi, Ralph. Two questions. One is Howard Zinn.
Only one question.
Only one question. All right.
I'd love to stay here all
this
night.
One. Okay.
A lot of people want to go see the so-called debates. And,
right.
You know,
okay. Howard Zinn wrote 2 articles recently in the Progressive saying that he's not to vote for you and to vote for Obama. I'd like for you to address that and perhaps the fallout of the radical left supporting you in this campaign. Thanks.
Yeah, 6 straight polls show that when I'm in the poll, McCain goes down, Obama stays the same. This is a different kind of year, but LA Times poll, CNN poll, McCain goes down and Obama stays the same. You can look at a summary of them on votenader.org. I think the left is making a serious mistake, as they do every 4 years. If you don't vote for the campaign that brings your agenda, The Nation magazine, Progressive magazine, into the electoral arena, how are you ever going to do anything? What are all these writers and editorial writers doing? Just venting their rage? Just developing wonderful futures for our country? If you don't go into the electoral arena and support who is fighting for that agenda, then you're going to be sorely disappointed by supporting the Democrats.
Mr. Nader.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Nader. Mr.
Oh,
Nader.
I'm sorry.
Mr.
I didn't
Nader,
see that. I'm sorry. There's a very bright light there.
As
go ahead.
briefly as I can, as I said, it's a great tragedy that you cannot be President of the United States. Yeah. But at this time, which I think the world is reaching a critical mass environmentally and in every other way, and in which you spoke of this juggernaut of American fascism, and in which you have been effectively shut out for 30 years of the American political process, what is the catalyst that will demarginalize what the message you are giving, the message you are espousing, preaching, and putting forth, which is so essential and which is critical? What is the catalyst that will make this into a mass awareness? Because the level of the mass level of awareness in this country is at a critically is in critically low condition. And what will catalyze this into something that can bring the curve of what you're saying up to speed with an accelerating curve of technology and the juggernaut of the fascism you're talking about, that is accelerating its suppression of everything you're saying and is taking over the world doing so and destroying it in the process.
Well, a lot of that, it's up to how many people show up.
We don't have time for Eugene Debs. It's not the early 19th century.
Yeah. No, look, there are a lot of answers to your questions, and it's not in our hands. It's on the hands of how many people multiply themselves and really get out, show up, mobilize. But what we think can be done is if we take back Congress, 535 men and women who put their shoes on every day like you and I.
And every one of them is bought and paid for by this same...
That doesn't matter. The corporations don't have a single vote. There's 630,000 people in each congressional district, 2,000 people organized tightly with 3 full-time staff around this agenda, supported by a majority of the people in those districts, can turn Congress around very quickly. We grow up rationalizing our own futility. I've heard it in 100 ways. I just heard it from you.
I'm not rationalizing futility. I'm saying it requires ingenious tactics, and it also requires enormous infusion of money to fight the system. It does not work to preach to those few individuals who have a political consciousness to even listen to what you have to say. It hasn't worked. And I say that with the greatest possible respect and admiration.
It depends on how much they multiply themselves. When I first started, I hitchhiked to Washington. It was 1.
There's no question that...
Okay, the point, I know what you're saying. But I'm just saying, I know what you're saying, but I just want to say to you, think of the Congress as the most powerful branch of government, 535 people, corporations control them, they don't have a single vote, we're the ones that have the vote. We're not organizing that vote, and if we do, it can change very rapidly. 535 people, all they want are your votes. They take money to get your votes. And so the organized consciousness of progressive people, if they can stop rationalizing their own futility and exaggerating what it takes for citizen action to turn that body around. And that's got the most powerful constitutional authority of the 3 branches. You turn Congress around, you turn the federal government around. Anyway, that'll be continued. 09. Yes.
Mr. Nader, do you think that the official story of the 9/11 attacks is true? And if you think it is, or it is not, then what would you do to bring out the truth behind?
Well, I supported the initiative to put on the ballot here in New York City. It didn't quite make it. They're going to try next year to have a 9/11 investigative commission by the city of New York. The 9/11 commission was grossly incomplete. First of all, Bush didn't even want one until the bereaved forced him to put it up. And then the first thing they did was say, we're not going to name names or assign responsibilities. This is an investigative commission? Not going to have names and so right from the beginning, for me, it lost its credibility. There does need to be a very intensive, independent investigation here.
Thank you.
You've been excluded from the debates with the Republican and the Democrats, but do you think that it might be possible that some of the other third-party candidates could have their own debate and put this on the internet? Internet is sort of a growing media and is transcending some of these national networks.
Tomorrow on Democracy Now!, Cynthia McKinney and me will answer Amy Goodman. Well, she will play some of the questions tonight on the debates, and we'll be answering it. There may be, look, there's an easy way to break the power of the debate commission. That is, let's say in 2012, in April of 2012, the national citizen groups, you know, all the good government groups, labor, religious, environmental, consumer, neighborhood, civil rights, they all got together and they basically said to the presidential candidates, here's your schedule from Boston to San Diego. We're going to have debates. We are going to present our agenda. We are going to run the debates and just try and say no because we happen to represent 85 million people. You see? That's the way to do it. We take it away from them. Nobody can stop us from doing that. Whenever you want to ask yourself, how do you confront powerful forces, ask yourself, what can you do that no one can stop you from doing? And half of democracy is showing up. No one can stop you from showing up. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Nader, there's one issue, and I'm sure I'm not alone, that in speaking to people about you, there's a tremendous fear about, which is the next justice. And people really feel, I mean, they just get deer in the headlights. Oh my God, we've just got to make sure that McCain doesn't become president so that he can't appoint a new justice to the Supreme Court and tip the balance. And I have a difficult time trying to foil that in conversation. I mean, one thing I thought was what you just said was that the legislature, that even if McCain is president, the Democrats can filibuster until he gives them a reasonable, but they don't have the guts to do it.
You answered your own question.
Is that
the Democrats could have stopped Roberts. They had the filibuster votes to stop Alito, Scalia, Thomas. But, you know, the Democrats controlled the Senate when they let Thomas through because 11 Democratic senators switched and supported Thomas. He wins 52-48. And Scalia, I was up there, I lobbied these things. I was up there begging one senator to vote against Scalia. Kennedy, Sarbanes, Gore, just one. He wins 98-0. And they knew exactly what kind of Supreme Court justice he was going to be, and he hasn't disappointed them.
No.
So always ask not just what the Republicans are going to propose, but why haven't the Democrats stopped Gore on the war, on the tax cuts for the wealthy, on and on? They could had the votes. They're
Thank you.
They're
really,
spineless.
That proves how useless it is to vote for them.
Yeah, well, you've showed it right there. Besides, the Democrats are going to have a big majority in the Senate and House, so they have no excuses whatsoever. Whoever wins, and you know it looks like it's going to be Obama. So whoever wins, the Senate and House can block them and block them. The old Democratic Party, when Nixon sent up Carswell, they said no to the Supreme Court. He sends up Hainsworth, Justice Hainsworth. They said no until he sent up Blackmun. That's the way the old Democrats used to play the game, against someone like Tricky Dick Nixon. Yes.
Thank you.
My question is related to some of the investment that corporation has all over the globe. And in my particular case that I've been taking a close look is in Latin America, with millions of workers working and making money for corporation in the United States. And I don't understand, and to me, I want to make this point, that I think those workers should be entitled to retire in United States and pay some of the retirement in American dollars because they made so much money. And taking in consideration that today everything is making abroad by workers for third world countries. So I thought that was a good issue for a campaign to start pushing for that. And believe me, I'm going to vote for you no matter what, but sometimes it's good to see those kind of issues mentioned because basically all the industry is gone. I came from the garment industry and I lost my job about 20 years ago. And so, but I'd like to see I guess I had to be a third candidate to mention that or to make that into an issue that really I think could be, have some kind of popular consent specifically in the Latino community and maybe other minorities, so-called minority.
Yeah, well, good point. A little trouble hearing you, but I just want to say that an economist, a great economist who passed on, Columbia University industrial engineer, looked at the LL Bean catalog, and 92% of all the products were produced abroad in the LL Bean catalog itself. I don't know whether I got to import your question, but is that what you were asking about?
More or less was just waiting for some of those workers to retire, like the workers retire here in the United States, because they are the one who making this corporation richer, and not to mention the bailout. But thank you, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah. Okay. bring your friends. Yes.
Do you support the India-US nuclear pact, even though India is under non-proliferation treaty?
Hold on. Please slow down. Do I what?
Do you support the India-US nuclear pact, even though India is on treaty? Nuclear pact.
Oh, with India?
Yeah.
Oh, no, of course. Oppose it. I mean, look, nuclear power's got to be put away and mothballed. It's so unsafe, it's so costly that the Wall Street will not finance a single new nuclear plant without a 100% U.S. government loan guarantee. What does that tell you? And this is a very demanding industry for taxpayer subsidies. Furthermore, if you're going to put $8 billion in a nuclear plant, you can get far more energy saved or produced by putting it into energy efficiency and renewable solar, wind, and geothermal. The payback is far greater, it's safer, it's more permanent, and you don't have to worry about sabotage or 250,000 years of geological stability for the radioactive waste. Madness. 1972, we took on the nuclear industry, and there hasn't been a single plant built since 1973. I mean, this is a great movement. I called nuclear power technologically insanity, technological insanity. Economically, from a national security point of view, from an environmental point of view, and from the simple point of view of protecting posterity and not leaving them with these deadly radioactive wastes. Yes?
Regarding globalization of our jobs, can you think of a way that we could have more jobs in this country, some way to fix that problem?
Yes, we have to initiate our right to withdraw from NAFTA and WTO and renegotiate these agreements so that our standards pull up standards abroad instead of having fascists and corporate dictators use their low standards to pull our standards down by getting our industry and our jobs from the multinationals who can ship them abroad. You cannot amend, you have to completely rewrite these agreements. One, so trade agreements stick to trade. They have no supremacy over labor, environment, consumer. We want to have international treaties on labor, like the ILO standards of the UN, or consumer or environment. We have separate treaties. That's number one. Number two, these trade agreements got to be open and transparent and democratic. They're everything but. Our laws can be repealed, and have been, by challenges from foreign countries who say our environmental standards are impeding imports of food and other products. And it's done by a secret court in Geneva under the World Trade Organization. I mean, it just completely sidesteps our courts, regulatory agencies, and legislature. It's a coup d'etat. And there's no tweaking it the way Obama talks about it. You have to replace it, separate it out, and have it just stick to trade. Thank you. Yes.
Hi, Ralph. I was just wondering, it occurred to me it'd be a good idea if we could use your campaign, or if you could use your campaign maybe, or somehow out of your campaign could come, because I have a feeling there, like you were talking about the 100 million poor people, and Martin Luther King Jr. was going to have a Poor People's March, and that never quite happened. But why can't we make that happen now? If we, with the campaign, mobilize people to go to Washington for Poor People's March for a living wage and jobs, using the arguments that you're raising with your solutions for the taxation changes and stuff, that would make that could kind of shake things up.
Yeah, excellent. That's part of showing up. The poor has to be heard from, and they're not being heard from. It's pretty hard going through day after day to have any time other than making it through the day. But there was a Poor People's March in the 60s. They set up a tent city on the mall in Washington, D.C. called Resurrection City, and they stayed there for days and days. At least it provided tremors in Congress. You see, the issue is whether Congress fears the people more than the corporations, and there needs to be. The veterans marched after World War I. That was a huge, contentious march to Washington to get their minuscule veteran benefits. We do need marches like that. But it takes people like Reverend Jay and some of the people you heard here and that you know in town to organize it. This is not anything we can organize. This is something only people on the ground who have neighborhood connections and mobilizations can organize. And I can tell you that it would really help a lot of citizen groups fighting for you in Washington if that were to occur. Yes.
Yes, in the news with the certain banks failing and larger banks buying them out, and even the government stepping in and buying in parts of these banks, I sort of recently discovered that the Federal Reserve is actually a private bank. What future ramifications and consequences can we look out for? Are we going to start seeing with this further centralization of power in our financial system?
Well, you saw the evidence. The Federal Reserve, in effect, increasing your liabilities as taxpayers and bailing out these firms in Wall Street. That's not exactly what a central bank is supposed to be doing, including investment banks and insurance companies, not just commercial banks. It is a government within a government. It is not funded by the taxpayer. It's funded by bank fees, and the bankers are on the boards of directors of the regional Fed. So it is a central bank funded by the bankers, responsive to the bankers, indentured to the bankers. And that's not the right thing to do. And in other countries, they are responsible to the parliament. We have to at least change the charter of the Federal Reserve, make sure it is not funded by the banks, make sure it's not controlled by the banks, because it's supposed to be for all the people. So you make it a much more democratic, open institution. And I'm glad Ron Paul kept raising that all over the country.
I'm a libertarian. I backed Ron Paul during the primaries. I was wondering, do you back the gold standard, and would you uphold my Second Amendment rights?
Well, the Supreme Court has done that, so that's over. Just a matter of regulation, and those will be further cases. Cities want to regulate the conditions under people have weapons. That's going to have to be litigated, and you know, Washington, D.C. is already starting litigation, but the Second Amendment is interpreted to be the way the NRA wants it to be interpreted. Given the police state that's emanating from the Bush regime, maybe the NRA is right, huh? I never thought I'd ever say that. And no, I think the gold standard, the amount of capital that's generated is far too big for the gold standard. In the old days, when the amount of capital was 1% of what it is now, I mean, you know how can they print money and expand money? And if you restricted it to the amount of gold, you wouldn't have enough money flow for the gigantic economies that are growing now. This is a very complicated subject, but that's my short answer. I had a news conference with Ron Paul and the two right-wing parties and Cynthia McKinney Green in our effort. And we agreed on 4 major areas: foreign policy, Federal Reserve, civil rights, Patriot Act, deficit financing of wars, and imperial presidency. And that's on our website, votenader.org. That has never happened before in American history, that the two, left and right, came together, which shows you how bad things are, right? Yes.
Hi, thank you for everything you've done in the past. And what is the law regarding the federal income tax? And if we are not required by law to pay it, what would you do to reform that? Thank you.
It is constitutionally authorized. Some people dispute that, but that was the amendment. Was it the 16th Amendment? Yeah, 16th Amendment to the Constitution. And my point is that we should tax first, before we tax human labor. We should tax that which society likes the least or dislikes the most. Therefore, you first tax security speculation, which is a huge revenue producer. You tax the addictive industries more, the gambling industries more, the corporate crime more, and pollution, carbon tax, before you tax human labor. You see, that's one. And it's pretty, it's pretty outrageous. Here in New York City, what's your sales tax? 7? 8%. All right, you go into a store and you buy the necessities of life, and you pay 8%. Tomorrow, someone buys $100, $200 million of Citibank puts or calls. They pay nothing. They pay no sales tax. So for speculation, there's no sales tax. For the necessities of life, there are. Isn't that an example of the power of the business community compared to the consumer community? That's the way we have to talk to people and our friends, because you talk to a conservative friend and you tell that conservative friend what I just said, you watch the reaction. There are so many outrages that arouse people regardless of whether they're conservative, liberal, progressive, anarchist. And we have to unify these people.
Good evening, Mr. Nader. The question I have is, what is your position with the constant lack of action of Congress in allowing the people of Puerto Rico a real opportunity to decide their future, to contemplate the possibility of independence or statehood, and to get out of the current situation, which we know it's colonial. There are 535 members of Congress, and yet the only Puerto Rican pseudo-representative, because it's only one, can only address Congress if there's a unanimous vote to allow that representative to talk. So tonight there's a hurricane about to hit the island, and it's big news. But on a daily basis, the island gets hit by the hurricane winds of colonialism. And I would like to know what your current position is on this lack of action from Congress to maintain the island under the colonial situation.
Well, I wrote my first column on the Commonwealth status of Puerto Rico in 1956. Where were you?
I was not even in the plans.
At the time, I was leading Estadista. But now, there should be free elections. And if the Puerto Rico wants to be independentistas, they should have free elections. I mean, you don't have any voting power in Congress. The people of the District of Columbia don't have any voting party in Congress. But the people in District of Columbia and the people in San Juan and Santurce, they're free to join the army and fight our criminal wars, right? And die, and yeah. So it's often said, well, let them have a plebiscite, but you know, it's not the right kind of plebiscite. You've got to have a real free conditions for it. And, you know, whoever wins, wins. And then they should have it again every few years. I suspect that the independentistas would not win on the first round. But, I mean, you know what's happened in Puerto Rico with these drug companies and these polluters and so on. And if it wasn't for the immigration to the U.S., and the remittances, it'd be much worse in Puerto Rico. And it's basically a colonial state. So we have to give them the right of self-determination.
Do you think there should be action from Congress?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, guys. This is the last question tonight. I'm very sorry, guys.
Okay, Ralph, I'm David Peel, who've been living in the East Village for over 25 years. I watched the rents.
Can you go back a little bit? It's hard to hear.
I'm David Peel from the Lower East Side. I've been here for over 25 years and watched the rents go from multiply and multiply and multiply. The question right now is this. You've been talking about the people under the radar screen, over 100 million people. Is there any way, can we have some kind of Peace Corps of people ourselves where we can start helping people? If the government don't help them, they help people to get back on their feet as a population of the other class of people in America.
You see, the echo is a problem. I can get like half your words. It's a beautiful place, but acoustically it's disadvantaged.
I mean, I'm talking about...
Slow down, ask the question slowly.
I'm talking about as far as people who are underneath the radar screen, the 100 million people. I see people here in the East Village paying most of their salaries for rents and eating. I see the bread lines on Tompkins Square Park every day to eat. Is there any way we can have some kind of Peace Corps of the people doing it rather than the government doing it for us so we can help the population?
Of course, of course. The government has just put $124 billion to bail out a corporation called AIG. $124 billion. Now imagine what a domestic Peace Corps would cost. It would be a fraction of that. And number two, we need more cooperative housing. Number three, we can eradicate homelessness. We know how to do it. It can be done very humanely without putting people in shelters. Look, we're a rich country, right? And they have deductions for mortgages for $1 million mansions. And like 50% of the home interest deduction goes to rich people. I mean, that's your biggest public housing subsidy. And you got people who can't afford rents who are living in hovels in our cities. So it's time to demand, you know, Frederick Douglass, the great abolitionist, said in 1850, he was a former slave, became one of the greatest orators in our country's history. He said, power concedes nothing without a demand, and a demand can only become powerful when it's collectively organized. So that's what you got to do. Anybody who can unlock the secret on how to get the poor to demonstrate, to march, Acorn's done a little of that, but I mean in real force, is going to see what showing up in a democracy can result in. I'm telling you, when the power structure looks around the country, they're testing us now on the bailout. If they don't see anything organized, why should they worry? Why shouldn't they go for the next bailout and the next bailout? So they have to see resistance. They have to see organized resistance, and nobody can keep people from organizing resistance. In 1775 in Farmington, Connecticut, to protest King George III, thousands of people showed up. Do you know how few people were in Connecticut at that time? It was like 80,000 people. You couldn't get thousands of people to show up in Farmington, Connecticut outside of invasion from Mars today. There are too many people are watching screens in virtual reality. Get them into reality. That's what you have to do. We have to do that.